chilly, I'm bored, there's nothing to do. My siblings are hogging all the bandwidth at home. Might as well just resort to America's pastime, baseball, right? No! Just throwing rocks at stuff. Nothing else to do at home. Might as well just go outside. Rocks. Why does Mr. Olchek have it talking about rocks and minerals anyway? I mean, it's just a rock, right? What's the big idea? Why can't we just study astronomy again? Oh, what about chemistry? At least we got to, you know, talk about some interesting reactions and do some cool labs. But why rocks? What's the big idea with these anyway? Well, if we think about astronomy being the study of the space, and stars and planets, and the processes that are happening there, or chemistry, the understanding of how the microscopic links with the macroscopic world, well, why can't we understand the story behind these? Because that's what geology is. Geology is the study, not simply of rocks, but the stories that they tell locked within. Each rock that you see, doesn't matter what it is, shape, size, type, texture, how it was made, is a puzzle piece into the story of our planet. Problem is that half of the puzzle pieces have been worn away to time, whether it was from weathering and erosion. We have to put these pieces of the puzzle together the best we can. And there are clues all around us in nature and in Platteville itself. If I were to spin my camera around, this quarry that we see here is a glimpse into Platteville's ancient past. And you've seen cuts like this. Now, when I say cut, I mean a cut in the rock. A cut like this tells us what was like here in Platteville deep in the past. And I'm going to be... The first stop we just came from was an currently active quarry just on the outskirts of Platteville. Now, I might be thinking, active? I thought all mining was done in Platteville. Now, there still are just a few active mines, but we don't really mine here lead or zinc. Usually that quarry that we just came from, and kind of the difference between a quarry and a mine is mines are typically underground. Quarries are at the surface, and we usually only take out of quarries building stone and also sand materials for road construction. So the one I just took you to, probably a lot of those materials are going to be taken for use in roadways and also construction buildings. Now, lead and zinc mines, not here anymore, but there again are clues to the remnants of those mines right here in downtown Platteville. Maybe you've seen this one before. At the tops of some of the very old buildings, not only does it have the year that that building was built, but also the names of who the building owner was, or sometimes the business. And I think the most interesting one, building that's still here, if you look to the top, the Jimmy John's building where we have some apartment complexes now, we actually can see the name of this old mine. And you should see Empire. It says Empire Block. Now, block meant that they owned that entire building block. But the Empire mine was one of the largest here in Platteville. I'll take you to it in a second, along with some other sites. So these old mines in Platteville, where can you find them? Where was the Empire mine? Well, can you recognize where I am? If I take a quick spin around, I'm actually on the beautiful Roundtree Branch Trail. And I'm down by, if I go ahead a little bit more, I see the dog park. If I go a little bit further down that winding road, it's actually a small river valley here. I'll get towards Culver's and Dunkin' Donuts and all those other places. So these buildings behind me, although they were not the original ones used for the Empire mine, still show how this area is still being used. It's actually currently an excavation site that, again, is working with rock quarrying, sand manufacturing, and the like. And this road off behind me leads to another quarry. Right? Those aren't necessarily connected to the Empire mine in any way, but this was the site of the Empire mine, which was very active with zinc and lead mining. Let's take you to another more familiar site that I bet you've been to. Next place I'm taking you to in Platteville, probably familiar to you and maybe nostalgic. This may be your favorite amusement park ride of all time. No, now I'm not talking the egg roll at Dairy Days. I don't want you guys puking all over me, but rather I'm at the Rollo Jameson Museum, where you probably, when you were much younger, you took a ride on the mining train ride. Now, what that actually did in its time in an active mine was to haul waste rock away from the hoist house. So the hoist house, which is right behind me here, and that's where you actually descend down into the mine, they would haul waste rock up through that. The train car would transport it away, and then they would try to isolate the valuable minerals, the lead, the zinc, away from rock that you see in the background here. Because not all rock that will be pulled out of a mine is going to be useful. Now, an efficient mine maybe only would get 25% mineral content out. By mineral content, I mean valuable stuff like lead and zinc. 25%, that's it. The rest is waste. And that waste rock, it doesn't get put back down into the mine. That wouldn't make sense. They just end up dumping it in a pile just like this. So this pile that you see here, it's actually pretty small. They've removed plenty of it. So there's just a remnant. This is called a tailing pile. So a tailing pile is just the waste. Many communities have to get creative when the mine closes of what do they do with all this stuff that's left over. It's called mine reclamation. Now, Platteville's done a good job at removing all the mine waste from its old mines, but other communities maybe didn't do that. Next, we're gonna head to a local town where they had to get a little bit more creative in getting rid of their mine waste, because it was sitting around for quite some time after all the mines shut down. What town am I in? I'm in Mineral Point right now. Kind of the basis of much of Wisconsin's early history. Wasn't agriculture, livestock that made Wisconsin initially, it was mining. So I'm in the woods of actually one of your teachers, Mrs. Paulskill. Her family owned some property in Mineral Point, a number of acres. And in one of the woods that's in their property is actually an abandoned mine. And I'm thinking, what would you look for if you wanted to find a mine? Now, you have to have kind of a trained eye to see what maybe you'd want, because all the buildings are gone. You may see here in the distance as I look around, there are no big mining buildings. There's no hoist house. What do you look for amongst all this? Trees, leaves, everything. What do you look for? Now, if you see, we talked about tailing piles over at the Rollo Jameson Mining Museum. And if you look close, so I rotate my camera here, you may see some piles in the distance. These very slight ridges, right? And you even see a pile here, this building that you see in the distance, that's just a little hunting shack. But what miners used to do, these holes that you see right here, these are called probing or badger holes. These little holes dot the landscape. This is where they're initially probing to find if could they see or get any lead in these areas. Now over Mrs. Paulskill and her crew, as you'll see them in the distance, they actually are at the main mine shaft itself. Now right next to the main mine shaft, you see this long trail or ridge. That's the main tailing pile as it goes off into the distance, and there's a larger tailing pile over here. So to the untrained eye, you can't really see it. All right, Paulskill crew, you are on camera. Say hello. Hi. Yeah, this is courtesy to Mrs. Paulskill and her family, because you might be wondering, can you just go on and find a mine? Can you roam around a Mineral Point and climb down into one? Now, the answer is no, you can't. Most of them that were around back in the 1800s and early 1900s are closed off. They've been sealed and you can't access them. Now, the ones that are around, you can't go onto someone's property without asking them, and also they are dangerous. So I'm going to extend my selfie stick here. Let's see how far we can get, because here is the main mine shaft itself. It is fenced off, as you can maybe see here. Let's see if we can get a good view of the shaft itself. As long as I don't drop Don't fall in.
If it does, it's too long.
I'm curious. I'm excited to see what that ends up looking like. You speculate how deep it is. And right next to the mine shaft itself, you may have noticed when I showed you before, here's the main tailing pile that's off to the side. The original hoist house would have been right on top of this, where they hauled a lot of the waste rock out. And as I walk over to the side here, this small little ridge, this is all the waste tailing rock. It's covered with leaves. So we climb up on top of this. So this is all your waste rock that was originally in the mine itself. And all these little small ridges, you can see a little badger hole there. There's even these smaller holes here where they're trying to find out where's the best spot to mine for this lead and zinc, because that's mainly what was in this mine. The biggest tailing pile is right over here in the distance. Yeah, but again, a lot of this, you can't see. There are no buildings that remain from the original mine itself. Just this main shaft here, which you would not want to get close to. It's pretty deep. You would not want to go down in that. Right? You can see a badger hole here, and off behind Mrs. Paulskill and her crew, a number of badger holes that are in the distance. The last spot I'm going to take you to for these mining videos is the Brewery Creek area in Mineral Point. The mine we just came from is kind of on the northern outskirts of town with Mrs. Paulskill on her property. This is kind of right in the main downtown area of Mineral Point itself. Now, it may look woodsy and scenic, but right on the other side of that tree line, it's kind of your main residential and business areas of Mineral Point. But through the town winds this very pretty creek, and there's a walking and running, even ATV trail that's right on the other side of this. Now, if you were to go back to the mid-1800s or early 1900s, this area looked very much different. Even into the 1990s, there was waste rock piles as far as the eye could see on the other side of this tree line. It's crazy, don't you think? To the 1990s, a lot of mine waste material still was all over the place in Mineral Point, and they had to do something about it, because even the creek areas here were said to have run red and orange with mine waste acid, what we would call mine waste drainage or runoff. You can even see how close that mining equipment was and mining infrastructure was to Brewery Creek. If I just spin the camera around, you can see one of the old smelting smokestacks that remain. I'll spin my camera here. This is probably the last remnant of old smelting plants here in Mineral Point. Luckily, better late than never, they ended up doing something about it and underwent a massive restoration project, which you're going to read about.